One thing we've learned about Will Howard through the first 5 games of the year is that he's good enough to get the job done.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to another Victory Monday edition of Locked On Buckeyes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Here on Monday, October 7th in the year 2024, I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. One thing I am doing after the Iowa game is looking back at what Will Howard has done through the first 5 games of the year. The Buckeyes are undefeated. Will Howard's game has gotten better each and every week. While there have been some mental errors and some interceptions that he has thrown, he has shown improvement week after week after week. 21-25 against Iowa over the weekend, 4 passing touchdowns. He is a guy that is good enough to get the job done. We saw that against Iowa, and we have seen that against every team Ohio State has played. Ohio State doesn't need Will Howard to be elite. That would be a lot to ask a guy that has this skill set. But all they need him to do is take care of the football, hand the ball off to Judkins and Henderson, and get the ball out to the receivers at the right time. More of a Craig Krenzel type of player than a Stroud or Fields or J.T. Barrett, which is what Ohio State needs right now. He has some of the skill set that Barrett has, but he's still a little bit different, which is fine. Sometimes the QB power or the QB blast that you see Chip Kelly calling or dialing up, sometimes it's the right call. Sometimes it's not the right call. I would feel more comfortable in the 4th and 2 that Howard didn't get if Barrett was the guy getting that 4th and 2 out of the shotgun, that call in the first half. That's a Barrett type of run, not a Will Howard type of run, and there's nothing wrong with that. And Will Howard being good enough right now is perfectly fine because around him is not just talent, really talented players. These guys are some of the best at their positions in the country. Let's go to the outside with Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, 2 of the best receivers in the country, and they happen to be on the same team. Let's go to the backfield with Judkins and Henderson, 2 of the best backs in the country that also happen to be on the same team. Let's go to some of the unselfish players like a Cardell Tate or Brandon Ennis or Will Kashmerick or any of the other tight ends. Very unselfish and just getting the job done consistently. We can't forget the people movers up front. That's what we're going to call the offensive line moving forward. I believe that was something that came up in the game when the Buckeyes were playing Iowa. I don't know if it was me or my wife. Somebody was saying, oh, they're moving people today. And that's exactly what we're going to call the offensive line because they are people movers. Doesn't matter if it's Iowa or Michigan State or whoever's been on Ohio State's schedule. The offensive line has moved people consistently to the tune that even teams that have really good rush defenses like a Michigan State and like in Iowa, they can't do anything. Can't get penetration, can't get into the backfield, can't get the backs in the backfield because the people movers are opening up holes, they're opening up lanes, and it's making it very easy for number 1 and for number 32 to get positive yards because the people movers up front are doing what they're supposed to do, which is move people. And I like watching good offensive line play, and I'm sure Will Howard enjoys the good O-line play that's been in front of him all year because it's making his job easy. Imagine a guy that has Will Howard's skill set behind a bad offensive line. For example, last year at Colorado, their O-line was bad. I believe Shedeur Sanders got sacked over 50 times in 12 games. That's unheard of. I mean, that's what Russell Wilson had to deal with in Seattle at times. And they were playing 16 regular season games over there in the NFL, where Colorado played 12 last year. Every college football team plays 12. So when you take that into consideration, that's a lot. 1, I don't think Will Howard would have ever thought to transfer to Colorado. But also 2, Will Howard is not behind an offensive line like that, which makes his job a whole lot easier. And then if you're Chip Kelly, and you know Will Howard is good enough to get the job done, there might be a mistake here or there. The mesh point might be off on a handoff, or it might be a bad throw. Will be a DB that is playing phenomenal coverage on whatever receiver is targeted on that play. What we're seeing right now with Chip Kelly is, yeah, in the first half, they might try a few things and they might try to see what the opposition is going to do. Once that third quarter hit, which we're going to talk about later in the show, lights out. You can't stop this offense. I have not seen a team all year, even Iowa's defense, which is one of the better ones in the country, they couldn't stop Ohio State. Also, when you go into that, the Buckeyes defense makes Will Howard's job easier. Let's just say what happened last week happens again against Oregon, which I don't think that could be catastrophic, literally, if Ohio State in the first half, where they have a fumble by Jeremiah Smith, an interception thrown by Will Howard, and a failure on 4th and 2. Let's just say that happens once again against Oregon. Well, Oregon is good enough to capitalize on that mistake. But the luxury that Ohio State has is, let's just say that happens again. I mean, those same 3 errors happen again against Oregon. Ohio State's defense is playing great. They got some areas they can work on too, but they're playing great football, which helps Will Howard. It makes his job easier. No matter what quarterback you're talking about, if it's Will Howard or somebody in the NFL, when you have all the weapons around you and you have an offensive line that just does their job consistently, it makes your job easy. You can roll out there and say, okay, I know Chip Kelly's going to try some things early on, and I know Chip Kelly is going to give us the right game plan for the team we're playing. We may have a different look between the Iowa game and then the Oregon game, which is fine because the Buckeyes have the skill set, the players to do that. But if that is the case, if Chip Kelly is going to try some things early on, once Chip Kelly gets a great feel of what's going to happen, Chip Kelly also has full and complete trust in Will Howard to get the job done consistently, which makes the Buckeyes offense this year a whole lot of fun. And I said it on the postcast on Saturday evening. It wouldn't have shocked me if Ohio State at the end of the day had 40-plus points against Iowa, because if Jeremiah Smith doesn't fumble, Ohio State probably scores. If Will Howard does not throw the interception, Ohio State probably scores. If they convert on that 4th and 2, Ohio State probably scores. And if they only score a field goal on all 3 of those drives, that's 9 more points. That would be 44 points that Ohio State would have scored on drives that in the first half of that game where Ohio State failed on those drives. Think about that. With the things that people may complain about with Will Howard and the things that people want to see better with the offense or better with the defense, if just 3 different plays were slightly different and Ohio State scored just field goals on those drives, you're looking at Ohio State scoring 40-plus points in the first 5 games of the year and setting themselves up to have more confidence going into the game against Oregon. Keep this in mind too. Carnell Tate wasn't playing. Bryson Ross just had a big catch early in the first quarter of that game against Iowa. If Carnell Tate was playing, it's possible that Iowa's secondary plays a little bit different coverage on that throw that ended up being an interception that Will Howard threw. It was a bad decision, but if the coverage is different, that might make things easier for Will Howard as well. So there's a lot of context here with how Will Howard played against Iowa, and the numbers were great. But let's just say the Buckeyes offense was at full strength. The numbers might be better. There might have been more touchdowns, and we're talking about a different Will Howard performance that we're talking about here on this Victory Monday. Speaking of what we're talking about here on this Victory Monday, there's one thing with Ohio State, offense and defense, that we have seen through 5 games, that they tend to dominate during a very crucial part of the game consistently. We'll talk about that next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen every day. One thing we have learned about Ohio State so far through the first 5 games of the year is that they consistently dominate in the third quarter. Doesn't matter if it's against Akron or against Marshall or against Iowa a couple days ago. The Buckeyes come out of the locker room. They make the necessary adjustments, and the game's over. I literally almost tweeted out a GIF within like the first 5 minutes of the third quarter and said game over. I think it was, so Jeremiah Smith scored on the Buckeyes' first drive of the second half. Then there was a turnover. Ohio State scored on the drive after that, and I was like, hey, game over. Because by that point, the feeling of the game was Iowa can't score, and Ohio State's in complete control of the game. Even with the errors in the first half, the game definitely felt over. And I think in this moment, when you look back to what Ohio State has done through the third quarters, they are just saying, you ain't doing nothing. Ohio State has scored 84 points in the third quarter through the first 5 games of the year and only given up 3. Those 3 points came against Akron. So think about what Michigan State did that kind of confused Ohio State's defense. Think about what Iowa did where Cade McNamara had a little bit of success. Not a lot, but a little bit of success versus, and then Marshall and Western Michigan and Akron. Think about what you got in the third quarter of those games. Most of those games, Ohio State only scored 14 points. In 2 of them against Akron and Iowa, the Buckeyes scored 21 points in those games in the third quarter alone. So if you're a team trying to come out there and play Ohio State down the road, you're sitting there trying to figure out, how do we slow them down when they come out of the locker room to start the second half? Because you may have a great first half game plan, but your second half game plan might not be as buttoned up as you think it is or it needs to be. So if I'm an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator, I'm sitting here trying to figure out, what do I do? They already got the best backfield in the country. They got 2 of the best receivers in the country. They got some of the best D-line unit in the country. They got some of the best secondary players in the country. How do we slow them down? Because you can't run against them. It's very hard to do anything through the air. The linebacker play has not been up to Ohio State standards, but it's been okay so far. What do you find on offense? The O-line's blocking out of their minds. The tight ends are coming in and just being very unselfish. What do you do? And if I'm Dan Lanning out there in Oregon and I'm thinking about just the last game Ohio State played, you're sitting there trying to figure out, how do we fix the things that Ohio State might try to do against us that might make us trip up a little bit? How do we prevent those errors for the entire game, but specifically in the third quarter? I think in every game this year, every team that Ohio State has played the backup. Cade McNamara's backup came in, and of course, he looked a little bit different than Cade McNamara. Some say, oh, he's a little flashier of a guy, but he's playing Ohio State's backup. So, like, it's apples to apples. He's not playing the ones at Ohio State, because guaranteed, the backup QB at Iowa, if he was playing the ones, buddy, he would have no success. None at all. But the third quarter dominance that we've seen from Ohio State, we saw once again, offense and defensively from Ohio State against Iowa, and I believe we're going to see that again against Oregon as well. I'm close. I know some of y'all are right now thinking, as Jay changed his tune about Ohio State's game against Oregon and who he thinks is going to win that game, I'm saving that for later in the week. Probably going to have a crossover between myself and Spencer McLaughlin, the host of Locked On Oregon Ducks, down the road. And trust me, you'll get the score prediction in that show. I can't unveil it yet. I'm still up in the air. Going to watch some more film before I'm comfortable changing my preseason prediction for this game coming up on Saturday. Another thing that we learned about Ohio State, or that we kind of saw on Saturday against Iowa, Ohio State literally beat Iowa at Iowa's game. And as Ryan Day said on the field during an on-field interview with Jenny Dell, he said it was basically 60 minutes of inside drill. It kind of reminded me of the old school Oklahoma drill that's been outlawed in many places around the country, at least at the high school level. I don't know if they can do it in college. I hope they still do it in the NFL. But the old school Oklahoma drill, I enjoyed it. Of course, I was a lineman, so you may not get to line up and just go one-on-one with somebody. I love it. But also, what do you find? That ain't for the faint of heart, man. Oklahoma drill is not just for the everyday type of player that can – just the average guy that comes in there, oh, I want to be on the team. I might not play. I'm not the most physical guy. I'm not the most aggressive guy. Oklahoma drill was not for guys like that. The Oklahoma drill was for men. You get in there, you get inside between them lines, knowing you can't go outside of the barrier, and you do your job. And it really tested your manhood at times because it wasn't your buddy to your right or your buddy to your left's going to help you. It's one-on-one. You got the guy crossing you, and if you're the running back, you realize I got to go straight. Ain't no one's dancing back and forth side to side. I got to go straight. And what we got against Ohio State and Iowa in that game, you saw Ohio State beat Iowa at its own game. Literally, Caleb Johnson was basically shut down, had under 50 rushing yards until the fourth quarter when the backups came in for Ohio State. That's when he had a couple longer runs. One of them went for a touchdown, but that was it. If you went Iowa's ones versus Ohio State's ones, Buckeyes defense won, which should give you a lot of confidence going into a game against Oregon that Oregon's offense can do a lot of things to trip up Ohio State. Now, they beat Iowa at Iowa's game. Will they be able to beat Oregon or Oregon's game? We're going to find out in a few days. I can't wait for this game, man. It's been circled on my calendar. Red Rivers this weekend. You got USC and Penn State. You got a lot of big-time matchups all day long, and trust me. Don't matter if you're going to be on the couch watching or if you're going to be out. I guarantee a lot of you, especially with the Buckeyes game being a night game on Saturday, a lot of you may be out but still checking the score because you want to see what's going on around the college football world. Also, last but not least, one thing, kind of our three things portion of our post-Iowa game coverage. Ohio State's O-line, I talked about it early, but let's highlight it again. Y'all, they're getting the job done too. I mean, Ryan Day also said, hey, quote, it all starts up front, end quote. And he's correct. Any coach out there realizes your offense is going to flow in the way that your offensive line lets it flow. If your offensive line messes things up or is it consistent, then your offense is going to mess things up or be consistent. Well, what we find so far, it doesn't matter if it's Chabola at right guard or Austin Saraveld. Doesn't matter if it's Donovan Jackson at left guard or Austin Saraveld. Doesn't matter what the combination of the five is up front. They're consistently getting the job done, which not only makes Will Howard's job easier, it makes Chip Kelly's job easier, and it frustrates the opposing defensive coaches because they can't figure out a way to combat what Ohio State's offensive line is doing so well. One thing that I noticed in this game, and I forget if it was in the third quarter, what portion of the game it was, Iowa ran a stunt, literally brought a guy from the outside of the D-line on the rush, looped him around back in, and you saw pinpoint accuracy and communication between Simmons and Jackson. They quickly deciphered what was going on. They picked up the looping guy around. Will Howard stayed up clean and made a phenomenal throw. The O-line is not only moving people, communicating well in the run game, but also in pass pro. Y'all, tell you, these are three reasons, not only that Ohio State beat Iowa, but these are reasons why I'm getting excited about what Ohio State might do on the road in Autzen Stadium on Saturday. One thing I am doing while thinking about what Ohio State did against Iowa is also reading some things on the internet, and something an ESPN staff writer put out there on the interweb really made him embarrass himself. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time is a one-stop shop. If you want to make your ticket purchasing process a whole lot easier and allow you to get a view from your seat before you buy or provide a lowest price guarantee or even provide coverage for your ticket, Game Time allows you to have just that. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and y'all make sure you use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, make sure you create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thank you all for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen every day. One thing I don't normally do is go out there and read something somebody wrote and really dive into and rip them here on the show. That's not normally what I do, not normally my cup of tea, but every now and then there's something that is written that just bad. It could be one line, it could be an entire article, but it's literally just bad. And David Hell, who was a staff writer for ESPN, put out a lengthy article just depicting the things that happened in week 6. The title of it, College Football Week 6 Highlights, Top Plays, Games, and Takeaways. And of course, there was a portion of it with there being a lot of upsets on Saturday, which was literally unheard of. The title of this is what caught my attention, and the first school under the title or the subtitle in this portion of it is Ohio State. The title of this portion of the article is Sluggish Day for the Top Teams. Ohio State's there, Georgia's there, Oregon's there, Ole Miss is there, Iowa State is there. So, of course, if you have multiple teams within the top 16 of the country, a lot of people are going to tune into this portion. And I had to scroll a little bit to get there. Anyways, here's what David Hell had to say. I'm going to read it word for word, not trying to mess up any words, because I want you to get the full grasp of what he said. Quote, had little trouble swatting away Iowa 35-7. Still, it had to feel like a loss for the Buckeyes, who are the first-ranked team to allow points to Iowa's offense since Michigan surrendered 2 touchdowns in a win over the Hawkeyes in Week 5 of 2022, end quote. So the first part of this where he says had little trouble swatting away Iowa 35-7, literally that's true. Like, I have nothing wrong with that. When you say it had to feel like a loss for the Buckeyes, sir, I understand that when you're a national writer that you aren't able to watch all 50 plus games at one time on a Saturday. So I'm not really like mad about that part. I'm not mad. You're doing a lot of box score watching or looking to see stats, looking to see the progression of what was scored in each quarter before you're trying to write really summaries about what happened in particular games. I get that. But to say it had to feel like a loss to the Buckeyes, who are the first-ranked team to allow points to Iowa's offense, here's my question about that very statement. Do you know how hard it is to make sure a team doesn't score on offense? I don't care if it's Iowa. I don't care if it's the worst team in college football. Do you realize how hard it is to hold the opposing offense to no points at all? Also, in context, that came in mop-up duty when Iowa starting running back, one of the best backs in the country, was going up against Ohio State's backups. Now, when you're a national writer, that little nugget might not be something that you truly you can grasp by the things you look at. So I understand that. I'm not trying to go that far. But, buddy, it's hard. Very hard. And the longer I host this show, I'm sitting here really getting a better grasp of how great Ohio State's defense is right now. Think back to what Ohio State had and has done this year defensively. A lot of great things. I mean, Aikman Olsen had his first college football interception over the weekend. They've had turnovers in multiple games. They're putting their foot on the opposing team's neck. No matter if they're scoring before that point or after, you're saying you're done. You're not going to be able to do anything. You're not going to be able to get any success. And once they say it's over, baby, it's over. And so when he says, and on Twitter, I did a little scrolling on his profile, I believe it was his, said that was a little sarcastic. One thing that's hard to do in writing is to really portray sarcasm in that way. I don't think anybody took this as sarcasm when you say still it had to feel like a loss for the Buckeyes, who are the first-ranked team to allow points to Iowa's offense. Forget how long ago it was. I don't care if it's the rival that it happened against. Nobody viewed that as sarcasm. Nobody did. It was a shot to Ohio State. Okay. It's a shot to a northern team, as Doug Lamarice and Bill Landis will talk about on Kings of the North. I saw that on Twitter, so I'm just going to relay that. Like, I don't know what's happened to Kings of the North, but I might on Monday to see what they had to say about that very portion of the article. But trust me, that being said about Ohio State is weird. It should not have been said. It's embarrassing, but also it reminds me about how great Ohio State's defense has been. I mean, my brother and I talk about this every now and then about stuff in the NFL, talking about how great Ohio State's defense has been and how elite and how much they just slowed down every offense the Buckeyes have played this year. my brother and I realized that in the NFL, it's hard to score. It's also like it's very, very hard to score. You think 32 teams, everybody on every team is a pro. They have pro regimens, they have pro routines, they have their own workouts, their own meal plans, they have everything, their own recovery systems. Everybody has a lot of things at their disposal, and they're just trying to do what? Prepare themselves every week for that game on Sunday. While doing that, you're realizing everybody's good. Everybody in the NFL is good. So if you score a touchdown in the NFL, that's a big reason why everybody rejoices in the ways that you do, because it's hard. If you literally score one touchdown every quarter in the NFL, that's hard, man. That's very, very hard to do. So for Ohio State's defense right now to be playing how well they did, especially against Iowa, that's something that we should be just tipping our cap or standing up and giving a loud clapping ovation, because, baby, it's hard. I don't know David Hill. I have no idea. If he wants to come on the pod and talk about this, we can go back and forth. That's fine. I will give him his credit. It's hard to swoop in and write a bunch of summaries when this game's played all day, literally from 12 noon all the way till 2 or 3 in the morning on the East Coast, because it's just how the sport has been going so far. I get it. It's hard. It's very, very hard. That was something that should not have been written. Still a loss to the Buckeyes, and for that to be the reason? No, man. No, man. Because everybody, even myself included, most people expected Caleb Johnson to score. Why? Because it's just what he's going to do. Because it's hard to stop a guy that's that good behind an offensive line like Iowa's that is that good, that's been that consistent, been that solid all year. I get blown away. I don't rip ESPN a lot on here. I don't rip a lot of stuff on here. But sometimes I get blown away by some of the abnormal things that are said about games that don't fit the description about the things that happen in the game. You have seen them. You have read them. I have seen them. I have read them. I would love that teams up in the North, especially Ohio State, would get more love. Not just Ohio State, but just Northern teams in general will get more love because they deserve it. But unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for that to consistently happen. Thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Craig Sheeman puts the Big Ten first when everyone else overlooks it. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Send every email to jstevens317@gmail.com. Buckeye fans, we're about here on a Victory Monday. We'll see you next time.